Hi, this is Amanda Klimaszewski reporting for Unit 15 in ATM 101 Weather and Climate of Alaska. In this unit we were asked to analyze the average temperature and climate of the Kodiak region for September and October through November. And we were also given climate maps of this region in order to analyze how it may relate to the temperature changes that were shown and the overall averages of the dew point and relative humidity of the Kodiak region. So you can see here that this is a plot for the surface air temperature of Kodiak starting from September 9th and going through September 16th. And you can see here at the beginning of the week there's some large variations starting at the 9th and the 10th, but you can see overall there's kind of a general pattern for each day where you can see how it's cooler in the morning, kind of spikes up during the midday, and then cools back down late at night, which is pretty normal to see. And you can see that the black line right here with the black dots on it, that's the average daily temperature for the Kodiak region. And you can see that it basically stayed right at around 51 to 50 degrees, dropping down lower 48, 49 region September 16th. And you would pretty much expect to see this around this time of year in September. It's a pretty expectable temperature to see in the Kodiak region. The Kodiak region is lower south than where I live in Fairbanks, so you would expect to see a warmer temperature year-round. So in September, where it may be a little bit cooler than this, in the Fairbanks region, you would expect that to be more close to the 50-degree range in Kodiak, where it's going to be warmer. Also in September, I'm not so sure and familiar with the Kodiak region, but it is pretty normal to see large variations between the day and nighttime temperatures. You can see here that September 10th, pretty early in the morning, it looks like it dropped down to about 35 degrees and then spiked back up a few hours later, about midday, to about 53 degrees. That's pretty normal to see in the Fairbanks region, large variations like that. And I'm sure it's not too unusual for the Kodiak region in the September months where you're getting less daylight during the nighttime, so you're going to have more of a decrease in temperature at night than what you would normally see during the summertime. So as it gets later in the year and there's less sunlight, you would expect to see more of a decrease in temperature at night. However, as the week progresses, you can see here on the September 11th and 12th, there's not as much of variation between temperatures. It does drop down here in the mid-morning, and then mid-afternoon, late afternoon, nighttime regions, it does spike back up and get warmer, and then it kind of creates this pattern again, dropping down in the morning and spiking back up. But it really doesn't have that large of a variation in temperature, roughly 10 to 15 degrees at the most between daytime and nighttime temperatures. And then here, it's September 13th, it spikes back down to about 40 degrees, and then relatively fast spikes up to 55 degrees, creating a pretty large variation of 15 degrees within a few hours, and then doing it again. But it does follow a pretty general path here that we were talking about, the increasing and decreasing temperatures based on the time of day that we're seeing here in September, which you would expect to see. And here is another plot for Kodiak region from October 28th through November 4th. Kind of somewhat of a general pattern as to the last plot, where at the beginning of the week you saw larger variations where it's dropping down more and then coming back up, mid-afternoon, late afternoon, and spiking back down again, and then the same pattern consistent over and over again. Again here, the October 30th and October 31st region, you kind of see smaller variations in temperature. The temperatures looks like they drop down here. You would expect to see this in the October region, where you're going to be more consistent in the lower temperatures. Again though, here about November 1st to the 4th, it's kind of spiking back up. Less variation here though once it does November 1st. The temperatures are a little bit higher, but there's less variation in the temperatures from the day and night time, which you could expect less variation as, now the sun really isn't showing as much, so you wouldn't expect to see as much variation between the day and time and nighttime. And compared to the last plot, you see that the average daily temperature for the Kodiak region has dropped quite a bit from where it was for the September week. Here it looks like it's roughly at about 37 degrees, and then about November 1st it drops down to about 36 degrees, which again you would expect to see this time of year. As it is getting colder, it's turning more into the winter months, so you would expect to see this decrease in average temperature for the Kodiak region. And for both these weeks, if the temperatures were warmer than climatology would have expected to show for them, to me this would suggest that there was cloudier weather rather than clear skies, as we've learned that clear skies usually is not related to warmer weather. It's usually related to colder weather, and cloudier skies is more related to warmer surface air temperatures. So if these temperatures were showing to be warmer than climatology, I would suspect that this would represent cloudier weather for these weeks. Also, as we saw in the weather maps, that the beginning of each week did start out being more clear and then end up being cloudier as the week progressed, and the low pressure systems moved in, which could explain why there was higher variations in temperature at the beginning of the week between the daytime and nighttime, as it may have caused it to become cooler at night if the skies were clear and warmer during the midday as the sun was shining, rather than keeping somewhat of a consistent warmer temperature once it became cloudier. Something that I found interesting when I was looking at the surface air temperature and then the humidity plots, it looked like there was somewhat of a pattern relating the two. As you can see here, the beginning of the week, the larger variations and higher spikes, and then it kind of drops down here midweek and then comes back up with lower variations towards the end of the week. Once you look over at the humidity plot, you can kind of see somewhat of the same trends here. There's larger spikes and variations towards the beginning of the week, and then here about midweek it drops down and then spiking back up again. As we were able to relate the changes in the climate and cloudiness to the temperature plot, I would suspect that you would be able to do the same here for the humidity, seeing as they're all closely related, that possibly during the beginning of the week when it was clear, there's the higher variations in relative humidity and dew point due to the clearer skies and the change of temperatures between the day and nighttime. And then here you're able to start seeing less variation towards the end of the week, and then higher humidity levels and dew point temperatures due to the increasing cloud coverage towards the end of the week and the low pressure systems that moved in. And then again here for the week of September 9th through the 16th, we did notice that there was larger variations in this temperature plot than the October plot, where the temperature variations through the different times were greater and not as close and consistent as the other plot. You can see the same sort of pattern and trend here in the humidity plot, where there's larger variations between the relative humidity and the dew point temperature. It kind of spikes up and down and varies from day to day and time to time, where there's some larger spikes and closer together. And it, again, you can see here, kind of stays a little bit more consistent towards the end of the week when we were able to start seeing cloudier weather move in. As we can see here, that although the cloudier weather in September may have made the temperatures be less variable towards the end of the week, it really didn't have an overall effect on temperature. It didn't increase the temperature too much. As you can see here at the beginning of the week, it was the highest temperature recorded at 60 degrees when we knew that it was clear. And then here at the end of the week, the highest the temperatures were getting were about 2 degrees. So I wouldn't say that in the September month that there being cloudiness would necessarily mean that it was going to be warm. However, in October, I could say that you could argue this, even though, again, at the beginning of the week, during the daytime, there was a high temperature of 45 degrees. You can see that it really didn't stay this warm for a majority of the time. It was only during the mid to late afternoon that it would really increase this high in temperature, and then it dropped down pretty low. However, at the end of the week, you can see that it was more consistently warm, and I would say that you could argue this is due to the cloudy weather, keeping the temperatures more consistent in the warmer range rather than cooler range. But just guessing that this is probably not something that's usual for Kodiak during the November time period, just knowing that this is winter months, that for it to stay pretty consistently warm between 35 and 45 degrees is probably not too typical for Kodiak region this time of year. And then here are the weather maps that we also used for the Kodiak region. Starting Monday, September 10th, you can see that the Kodiak region and south central region of Alaska is fairly clear here. There's a low pressure system over to the west of Alaska, and then a couple days later on the 12th of September, you can see that there has been a low pressure system that has moved over the Kodiak region, bringing with it some cloudier weather that we had talked about earlier. And then for the 15th, again, mostly cloudy weather over the Kodiak region with a low pressure system over to the southwest of Alaska. And then again, the same sort of trend that we had talked about again for October 28th. The Kodiak and south central region of Alaska is somewhat clear. There's a little bit of scattered cloud, but it's mostly clear. And then Wednesday, you can see that another low pressure system has moved over the Kodiak region and south central region, bringing with it again some cloudier weather. And then sort of the same view here, cloudier weather and a low pressure system in the Kodiak region that brought with it some of the warmer temperatures that we had experienced looking at the plots.